Right, morning all. So just a quick update really, apologies for the delay. The scheduling for YouTube has definitely been bouncing around over the last few days. Essentially what we're going to try and do is 2 videos a week. When lockdown sort of ends here in the UK, which is in a few weeks time, we're going to be looking at a Monday, Thursday drop for YouTube. So Monday, Thursday drop. Until that point, it's just going to be a couple times a week. It's always going to be 2 to 3 videos a week, but definitely a minimum of 2. And we're looking at Monday, Thursday drop moving forward. So that is going to have some sort of timetable attached to it. Today, we're going to have a little look around the unit. The electrics are in. The electrics are in, which basically means that's it. It's just got to be cladded, boarded, got to wait for screen, bifold doors, padding. There's a load to go on. Looking ideally, it's going to open 1st of May. That is ideally when it's going to happen. I am hopeful that I'm going to be able to watch the Masters in there. I doubt it, but I'm hopeful it's going to happen. So today, I'm going to have a little bit of a chat to you about the takeaway. Right, I get a lot of questions on this about the takeaway, and I do a load of online lessons. And to be honest, setup is literally 9/10 of the law in my opinion. I think if you can set yourself up in the right dynamic, you help yourself out. But you can still swing poorly from a good takeaway, and you can still swing poorly from a good setup. But there are some things in a takeaway that I think if people had a better understanding of what should happen in a takeaway, for a really typically nice on-plane golf swing, you don't have to swing it on plane to be a good golfer. I'll say that again. You don't have to swing it on plane and have a perfect takeaway to be a good golfer. That is just not a real thing. Where I align my ideas based upon a takeaway is just very simple. It tends to set you up for a better sequence in general. If you can start and sequence stuff correctly going away from the ball, you've got a better chance of holding that sequence throughout your delivery. That's basically my thoughts on it. But there are some good things that good players do in the takeaway that I would say your guy that's struggling or your guy that's playing well, they do have different patterns. So your better players have certain patterns and the people that struggle have certain patterns. So we're going to go over like a basic principle today of a takeaway. If you're a little bit lost, this is going to help. And then we're also going to go over the basic principles of what not to do. So even if you don't like this, a couple of things that you shouldn't do, because that is probably going to make your life harder. Right, let's go have a quick look at the unit and then we'll have a little look. Right, still a bomb site, but we have wiring now. We still have wiring. Cladding has not yet arrived. It's going to arrive over the next few days. We have got some plasterboard though. The plasterboard has arrived, which is great. Basically, over the next day or so, this is the last day that you're going to see the inside of the unit. You're probably thinking like me that nothing's happened. COVID has happened, isn't it? So we haven't really had time, or I guess people have been able to get here with supplies. However, we are all wired up. Everything is in. So as we walk in through the door, we've got a bit of a security box and some remote lighting that we can also talk to the house. The house can turn on the lighting. Got some social media stuff going on up there with regards to, we have a sort of pre-built-in camera to project lights this way. Now, when you look at this way, we've got 2 plugs on the wall for 2 TVs. So essentially TV, TV. So we've got almost them pre-built in. So 2 sockets ready for 2 TVs. We've also got some sockets here for some sort of connection cables for the quad. Just whatever we need, relatively speaking, is going to be there. Now desk, where I'm going to do a bit of my sort of work. Online lessons will be pretty much in this corner. So we've obviously got some plugs down here. And again, a lot going on up there because it's going to be sort of lighting to work across the unit. So it's quite difficult to actually think about where you need stuff and then just running some rings of lights above. So that everything's in now, the connections are all in. If you're thinking about doing this sort of stuff, it is actually one of those things that I think is a lot harder than what people think, because you're like, yeah, I'll just chuck up a home unit. And then when you get in there, you go, well, no, I've actually got to design it. And not only have I got to design it now, I've got to design it to portray to somebody else. And then they've got to put in the wire in to the points where you need them, like that. That looks like a mess. But the reality is, I need all the wiring up there because that's below it's going to be where my desk is, so that's where everything needs to be. All that needs to be pre-built in because that's where the TV is going to be, relative to one to have for technical stuff, one to have for quad stuff. That just has to happen. So if you are thinking about doing it, my advice is spend a long time thinking about the wiring, because once that stuff goes on, it's game over. It is literally game over. I mean, obviously you can change it, but it is game over, because once that stuff goes on, and then the plaster goes on, and then the padding goes on, because essentially most of that is going to be padded for when I top it, shank it, block it, it is going to be a nightmare to change. So next step is to get all this on, plastered, and then effectively then it's just go time. I'm now simply just waiting for bifolds, just ordered my padding, just about to order my flooring. Yeah, and before you know it, that's it. If you're ordering a screen though from Foresight, the boys at Foresight have done me a wicked favour, but there is a 3-week lead time on the screens. The world of golf's just gone nuts. So yeah, so there's a bit of an update. Right, let's go and talk takeaway. Okay, so the takeaway. Firstly, here's a really simple way for you guys at home to simplify what's going on. And I'm going to give you sort of an idea of why it should happen first and foremost. And then what you want to do with it is up to you. But for me, if I ever had someone that was struggling and they were getting tied up and lost with trying to make the golf swing a bit more complicated than it needs to be, or the takeaway a little more complicated than it needs to be, here's a really simple method that then you can build on. So essentially the golf swing is a circle, right? The golf swing is a circle. And we'll continue to ignore the fact that my garden is a bomb site, and we'll just ignore that. But if I stand here naturally, okay, and I just hold the golf club out in front of me, my hands are pretty much on this black line, okay? Chest, hands, golf club. Now, as I turn to the camera, my hands are going to work in relative to that black line, okay? So I'm not physically pulling my hands in or trying to change any radius. I'm trying to almost keep my hands out in front of me to a certain stretch, and I just turn. So from the camera's perspective, my hands have worked in and the club head has stayed out. But all I've done is I have just turned. That's literally all I've done. I'm trying to turn the center line of my body as still as I can and keep the radius on the golf club. That is about as difficult as a takeaway should be. Now, let's run that now in a tilt. So I'm stood vertically here. That's not a golf swing. Let's run that in a small tilt. Now I'll do the same thing. My hands have worked in and the club head has stayed out. That is not me trying to get my hands to work in and the golf club to stay out. I'm not trying to be stupid on my wrist conditions. While that can help, if you're somebody that sees maybe a bit of a golf club behind you, feeling those sorts of ideas, where I am physically trying to keep my right arm on top of my left for a longer period of time, that feeling can help realign some stuff. But essentially all we're talking about here is a golf swing is a circle. My circle, when I stand upright, my hands work in. Your hands will work in. But if I keep going with that, at some point, the club head and hand are all going to line up. Okay, at some point, they all line up. That's not me forcing a hinge profile or me trying to change the synchronization. I'm just turning. Okay. Now, if I go into now a front bend enough to hit a golf shot, I would do the same. My hands now look like they're working in. But the hinge profile, just the simple idea of allowing the golf club to work up towards the sky, will just very simply allow the golf club and handle to work in alignment together. But essentially from where they started, the hands will look like they worked in relative to my body. Again, that's not me trying to pull them in or trying to get my left arm to work across my body, which I feel like a lot of people get wrong. I feel like people say, well, golf club's out in front of me, hands out in front of me, I've got to go behind me, so they start pulling stuff behind them. That's when the handle works in, the club works in, and they get too shallow. Or the body stays still and they use the hands and arms and the golf club goes shallow. If you just simply understand that there are 3 points of contact to be talked about here, in terms of I've got my chest unit, my hand unit, and I've got my golf club. Now as I turn, they will all turn to my backswing, they'll all turn. But they'll do so on different rates. That golf club is further away from me than my hand. So in order for my golf club, the head, to get parallel to the screen here, it will take longer than my hands. That's all we've got to understand. We've got to understand that as we in a front bend, the hands will look like they work closest to us as well. But that's just the arc working. You can see there again, my hands work from that black line and they work in. That's just a circle. If you did nothing more just to understand takeaway, if you're lost with trying to do this, I see a lot of people doing this. Right, that's good. That's really good. That's really good. That's not so good. I don't understand it. It's just turn away from the shot on a nice synchronization where you're not trying to race the club head, you're not trying to pull your hands and arms in, you're not trying to do too much of the body. Everything just working away in a nice sequence. You can see it really easy. But there are some do's and some don'ts with regards to the takeaway. What you won't see on tour, you might see on tour. What you won't see on tour very often, that's probably where we need to have a chat about it, is you won't see, as a general rule, someone whipping the club head in behind their hands, where the shaft then goes super shallow and then they steepen it on the way down. As a result, things are opposites and reactions. So what you won't see is the golf club go this way and then that way. What you might see is the club head staying way outside the hands, a little more vertical and then shallow and underneath. There are tendencies for good and bad players. You will tend to see better players keeping the club head, this thing, outside the hands for a long run away back. What you will also tend to see is the idea of the right arm staying on top of the left for a longer period of time. So you might see the idea of the right arm working on top of the left. So there on the way back, you can see my right arm's on top of my left. You wouldn't see too quickly in the backswing the left arm working on top of the right, because that will then change where the golf club goes. So if I keep my right arm on top of my left, you're going to see that club head is outside my hands. All right, shut, but this is an example. If I did my left arm on top of my right early, I'd see open face, shallow takeaway. That's probably a killer move. So again, there are things that people do and people struggle with, and there are good things that good players do that they don't struggle with. So if you're a little bit lost on the takeaway, do yourself a favour. Stand pretty close to a vertical line. You could use the back fence, you could use whatever you want to put your hands on it. Then just turn. You'll note that your hands come in. Okay, so now you're sort of understanding that in the takeaway, as you're in the tilt, your hands should come in. Okay, we don't have to do anything other than that. As you put a little bit of hinge on it, everything will set nicely. That is your really nice method to take a golf club away. It is not the only method. That has to be said about 1 billion times. It's not the only method, it's not the only method, it's definitely not the only method. If it's not going to be your method, which it might not be, make sure that it resides somewhere between this method and that method. Anywhere in that sort of frame is going to be pretty good. The amount of hinge you've got on it, whatever it is. They are the good player's tendencies, because it's going to keep the right arm a little more internal, the right shoulder a little more on top of it, rather than everything working behind you. The moment you go external and behind, you will react. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that keeps the game a little bit more simple. Just try and work that drill and then try and keep on the good side of things, good side of life. All right guys, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. It is terrible weather today and I've had about 10 minutes in the window to do this. But the next time we talk, I think the unit might be plastered. I literally can't wait. All right guys, take care. If you're in the UK, I think it's about 2 weeks left to go now until we got a bit of freedom. Speak to you all soon.